have you here. So we'd like to kick off with the first question just around the focuses that HTTP is covering today, which includes inclusive public policy solutions that prioritize civil rights protections and equitable, affordable access to broadband, as well as increased diversity in media and throughout the tech workforce. So to kick off, what trends are you seeing across these areas that the emerging technology community should be aware of?
Yeah, so it's kind of, there's a lot of things going on at once, it feels like, and none of them can really be ignored. So, we are, the buying power of Latinos, the economic power of Latinos can't be overstated. We need to be involved. We're one of the fastest growing marginalized communities. We utilize smartphones at a higher rate. We our increase in use of internet increased over the pandemic. So I mean, us as a community we're everywhere and we're constantly growing, and it's super important that we are involved in all of the emerging trends that are happening. But there's so many things like that we have historically been left out of, that we want to make sure that we don't get left behind. And so, a lot, especially in the Latino community, we're high for targeted misinformation. We're high for kind of the digital divide is kind of leaving us behind. But but until we go back and kind of look at the beginning pictures, it's hard to kind of continue on for the emerging trends. So it's all kind of interconnected. So, we are a huge economic power and buying power, but a lot of our stories still aren't being told, or, we're still not represented in higher levels of tech companies in the C-suite. We're still not constantly be giving us, in media, we're not as many places as we should or could be. So it's this kind of two-pronged thing that everybody, everybody loves Pedro Pascal, but where are more of our stories? And, we are using the internet, but then we're also getting this misinformation and targeted disinformation. We're also not a monolith. So it kind of creates this other little aspect of, it's not, we all don't speak Spanish, and we're all not immigrants that just came over. And so some of us are, and some of us live in all these different generational households. And so, it's hard, there's a lot going on, and a lot that we want to make sure, and HTTP really works hard on trying to be part of those conversations with all the trends that are happening. And it's really good to see organizations like yourself and coalitions like this, because it's happening in all front. We need more Latino government leaders. We are really big. We hope that the government puts a Latino FCC commissioner on the board. We need also, we have focused on trying to get, Latinos access to broadband, access to the things that we haven't historically had. So it takes working in tandem with industry and government and educational resources to make sure that we're getting there.
That's really great insight. And something around the targeted misinformation, that's been something that is a point of discussion with the emerging technology community right now, especially with ChatGPT having just come out. It's really changing the nature of how information is shared and developed, and being able to include these stories that are sometimes not included in underrepresented communities is so pivotal and key to the efforts across the emerging technology community. And as you mentioned, the coalition building is at the heart of it all. And so that's been a major theme with the accelerator, something that we're focusing on. And I know we've talked about that previously and how important it is to these efforts. And so that is something that we will talk about more today. And with that, I'll move to our next question. With the emerging technologies that are coming out and have been around for some time, what do you see as some of the greatest challenges regarding the digital divide for civil rights protections and equity considerations? One of the examples we have is, and as you mentioned, not everybody has equal access to broadband, and this creates disparities in education, job opportunities, civic engagement, And so how does this really impact the underrepresented communities, as well as governments whose citizenry the participation is limited because of the either lack of access to technology or distance created by technology?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. And like you said, we kind of have to like start there of not everybody has this equal access. And so they're already going to be behind when it comes to any civil rights or any equal opportunities. So we're really happy with, we're really happy that the steps are being taken with the Infrastructure Act and BEAD money and NTIA and going to states. But on the flip side, we want to make sure that those states and the government agencies and municipalities and people building the infrastructure and tech companies building the infrastructure are connecting with the folks on the ground, and not just like a library or, at maybe the major city has one organization, but there are, Latino organizations and marginalized communities organizations that are working with the community and they know where the need is. And so, if you're not talking to them and talking to those organizations on the ground, you're not going to know what's needed. And it's different with every location. Some states need infrastructure to begin with. They don't even have the access to the broadband. And so they won't even be able to participate in digital skills. And some states need more digital literacy training or more access to devices. Maybe there's, students in certain areas are lacking devices. So it's definitely a state by state process. And, we're really happy that our coalition of organizations have these affiliates in all of these states and all of these locations, because even they're working on higher level, but each state, as you go down by down and drill into it a little bit more, different locations and different areas have different needs, and it's hard work, but it's really important to ensure that we all get that civic engagement that we're needed. And, from there, so that's like the baseline level to make sure that, we're talking about just the basic needs. Is it affordable? Is it accessible? Do they have it? And then you also have to make sure that, okay, are we also connecting with startups and businesses and small businesses in those locations too? Do they have access to the same resources and marketing? And, there are a lot of little investors and companies all over the United States too. And are they being included in these conversations of access and input of, what can build their community up? And without all of those things kind of working in tandem, that divide is only going to grow more. So like we said, it's hard work, like we talked about, but it's necessary. And also, so we have a program called ACT Para Me, which is we have bilingual resources for the Affordable Connectivity Program in Spanish and English. So when you're talking about government access or when you're talking about things like that, this is a program that's great to get affordable internet connection. The main way you apply for it, though, is online. And if you don't even have the infrastructure for something like that, how can you even apply to get online and, ask your questions? And which is if you're already in the National Verifier System, there's a verifier system, or, that your student has lunch, but like, where can I go on a device with all of my documents, every little thing that I need to actually apply for the government things that are out there, or the ISP things that are out there. And sometimes, okay, you have to sign up with your internet provider first, and then you're going to connect here. And so there's all of these little pieces that are really great in theory and really great for the community, and we don't want them to go away. We need to continue the ACP, we need to continue funding for all that, but to think about the human factors of how can people actually access it. Is it actually working, and like I said, most Latinos use their smartphones. Is it mobile? Is the application mobile friendly? That's like a very basic thing, because both young and older generations, that's all they have. Sometimes they don't have a laptop, or they don't have a desktop computer, or they don't have internet that they can hardwire into. So again, it's like all of these different things working together, so that divide and so that civic engagement can lessen and work better for everybody.
That the human factor. Oh, can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear. I saw there was a chat
Okay.
coming up, and I was like, okay.
Yes, we do have some chats if you're open to answering them.
Yeah, where however you want to do it. Sorry, I know you're
Okay.
moderating.
Maybe what we can do here is, Arlinda, I see your comment. Maybe we can do the initial questions and then jump to the chat at the end, if that works. So one thing I did want to comment on with the human factors here is that baseline of this is really what's needed, and sometimes it's a lot simpler than we think, much simpler than some of these systems we're building and some of these tools we're using. And in previous conversations on the accelerator, we recently had a panel that covered equity, and some of the feedback was just that you can have the outcomes that you're hoping for by using different technologies identified. But once you've built for those and you're testing them, it really needs to ensure that it's actually making the process easier for humans, because you can have a really great procedure or a really great process that applies in a specific area that would work for someone who had internet. But if the person
Right.
doesn't have access to internet, there's a big question mark on, well, then why are we building this great tool or this great system? And the other thing that we've previously discussed with another talk on the accelerator around civic society is just how distance can be created with technologies. And so understanding those basic things that people need, whether it's a piece of hardware, a computer, access to internet, and the ability to connect wherever they are geographically, those things really do apply to these areas. And we recently talked with a public-private coalition that was focused on the grant making process, and they put the human factor at the beginning of the process to understand what exactly the problem was that they were trying to solve. And then it was determined that emerging technology could help enable that solving of the problem and being able to take into account, well, what is it really like on the ground for the underrepresented communities we're serving is very much at play here. So thank you for sharing that insight. And when it comes to being on the ground and working with humans, there is a big question mark right now around privacy and how does privacy apply here? And so we had a question for you on what is the role of privacy during this time of technological change? For example, domestically, the United States has a focus on human rights and open innovation, but we do not see this throughout the world currently, perhaps where other countries are using tools to access the data of unwitting citizens who may even be targeted by their own governments. At the beginning, JudeAnne, you mentioned that oftentimes underrepresented communities are targeted with misinformation. And so are regulations moving quickly enough? And what is the role of citizens throughout the process?
Yeah, there's definitely an absence of cohesive regulations that would be beneficial for everybody. And it's kind of coming in this piecemeal, while on some aspects, a state-by-state approach works well in terms of infrastructure and, you know, what certain communities need. Something like privacy that is kind of an overarching thing that is affecting all of us. It's not where it needs to be. And so it's really now, unfortunately or fortunately, kind of on the responsibility of community organizations and tech and government to really be transparent and accessible. So whether that's in languages or you know, audible, however it needs to be, depending on the technology, that they're being really transparent with what they're doing, whether that's data collection, third party, you know, when you enter things, where is it going? How long is it stored? If it's your biometrics, if it's your, you know, your resume history, whatever that data is. And it really needs to be transparent across all stages of development. And, you know, hey, there's a new iteration out, this new iteration of this technology, this is what's going to happen. When you enter these things into chat GPT, like this is how many things are being held on to or whatever it is. And then it's also, you know, the point of privacy is also really important, that we have digital skilled workers on the back end who, when they're creating these systems, that they know that these a diverse set of engineers and workers working on the back end, whether that's in government or in tech, can be at the table when it happens and say, hey, are we thinking about this before it even comes out? You know, are we making sure that this privacy is transparent and clear and in different languages? Are we making sure that we're not creating an environment that could be ripe with misinformation or disinformation because there is no regulation or privacy regulation? And And so there's that aspect of when it's being created and how it's being sold. And then there's also a community and educational aspect of community organizations and partners going out and saying, hey, when you use this app, this is what's happening, and you need to know that. And, it's our part as nonprofits, as people who interact with community, and any educators that are on the line, or professors, or, university researchers, that they're like, hey, this is when you use this, just so so you have full knowledge of, like, this is what's happening when you're using this app. This is the data that's being collected. This is what you're agreeing to, because a lot of people just don't have the time and they don't have the capacity, and they're like worried about, very important things in their life, as they should be. And they're like, I know this app makes it easier, but maybe if they knew that this app also collected their data and might possibly sell it, or, use Ring footage to do whatever with it, maybe they would think twice and take a step back and be like, okay, is this really the app or the technology or the piece of information that I want to use? And if both things aren't happening regardless of regulation, then there's a big piece of the pie missing, and it's just kind of furthering this divide and furthering this lack of access and lack of knowledge, and now all of your personal data is gone, and now you just kind of have no control over any situation because you didn't know.
And that's something, we go from having the access and then potentially having more distance created through working with the technologies, to then not having information on how effectively the technologies work with the data. And so including that transparency and making it accessible creates, can help create those environments where privacy is respected. But definitely an ongoing conversation that we've been learning a lot about. So thank you for sharing that. The one other final question we wanted to ask you before we go to the closing remarks is, it's important to consider the potential impact of emerging technologies on civil rights and take steps to mitigate negative or unintended consequences, as we've been discussing. And this requires collaboration between technology companies, governments, and civil rights organizations to ensure that technology is developed and used in a way that is fair and equitable for the people using it. And with the groundwork that's been done in these areas, for your experience with HTTP, what does successful collaboration with industry and citizens and government look like? And how can an equitable distribution of funds support equal participation?
Yeah, so a coalition like this, a coalition like HTTP, in tandem with other marginalized communities, in tandem with government and municipalities, is going to be super important to ensure that technology and emerging technology moving forward doesn't just keep creating this distance, or doesn't just keep creating this divide, like you said, or have negative or unintended consequences. And I think it goes back to what we've been talking about kind of over, is that all of these things are intertwined. So without the infrastructure and the funds for the infrastructure to get to the communities that they need to go to, you're going to lack basic access. And without kind of fixing the problems from a lot of these first iteration of technologies, those problems are just going to continue forward. And if you don't have people in the room who are creating the technologies, or people in government that reflect the communities that they're coming from either, then no one's going to be there to, whether they're in the room with the whether they're creating the technology, whether they're working on the algorithm or the bias or the metaverse or whatever it is, if those aren't a diverse set of people, and there's not enough of a educational pipeline or technology, pipeline to get the kids in the room, or to get skilled digital trained workers, then you're going to be missing that aspect on a higher level. I'm doing it down here. So, it's like you really have to come at it from all areas and work with community organizations on the ground, and have that conversation and intentionally center them when you're having these discussions, when you're building these things. And I think a lot of it will take intentionality, and it will take reaching out, not only to just like the library, but to the whole coalition, not only to just, one section of the country, but to all of them. And, a lot of these coalition or organizations that do work with on the ground and collaborate, they might not always have technology in their name, but they're still doing the work. They're still providing access to devices, or, telling people how to do telehealth or where to go for those kind of services, even if maybe technology is not in the name, or maybe that's not only what they do. So it's really going to take this intentional intersectionality to build community and to have kind of hard conversations of listening to what people could improve on, and working with the tech industry and the government, and not shying away from saying, hey, this is where you can improve on, and this is where it's going well, and this is what we need from a community standpoint. And then asking the questions and being willing not to not make it even harder than it is. Sometimes it is just like, hey, we need the funds. That's the baseline. This is what would move us forward. Hey, we need people in the room. That's what would move us forward. Because sometimes I think two people can get lost in the, well, if we have to build this and then do this and X, Y, and Z before this other thing can happen. And it's like, no, you got to keep moving forward, and you got to actually do concrete steps. And part of that is intentionally listening to those that you're talking to.
That's great feedback. And that's an area that we are hoping to bring more of the stories that are not shared to the emerging technology community of interest. And so we're just so fortunate to have you here today. And then also to be able to apply those voices and perspectives and stories to the problem statements and what the challenges they're experiencing and how emerging technology can be applied in those different areas. So thank you for your insights today, JudeAnne. Are there any final thoughts you would like to leave with the audience?
We had mentioned this before, but I thought it was just good to reiterate that, it feels hard because it is hard, and this is hard work, and it is multifaceted, just like the technology that everyone is working on, or the technology that we're building towards. We're building towards complex things, and they're complex problems that need concrete and sometimes complex solutions. So really appreciate all the hard work that everyone's doing, and not to give up, and to keep moving forward, and we can solve one while we continue to accelerate too as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. Absolutely
you.
Fantastic conversation. And thank you for your support for the Accelerator.
Yes, thank you so much for having me and open, and HTTP is definitely here. Like I said, we have the ACP resources for the Affordable Connectivity Program. We have our coalition members too. So, as all your members are either working, on the government side or the technology side, please don't hesitate to reach out to us to have how we can be a resource, or maybe we connect you to the people on the ground that whatever members or anybody might need, or, just talk about things. Don't be afraid to ask questions too. So, and we're happy to be there and support that. And thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Arlinda, again, and shout out again to Chris.
Thank you, JudeAnne.
Yes. Special shout out to Arlinda. Thank you, Arlinda.